So you describe a particular trip where your dad and Lizzie and a couple other folks are on a sailboat. Describe the trip they take, because you were pleased to know that they were following your old stomping grounds.
I was really pleased. They took off on a holiday from Bremerton, eventually ended up on Hood Canal, on a portion of the canal where I now have my own summer home. And they went into Pleasant Harbor, which is adjacent to Brennan, and spent a day or two there, then sailed back. Stopping, I might say, for water at KUOW, which is only, that's the equivalent of Timbuktu. No one knows where KUOW is. It's at the bottom of the Tewandas Peninsula, and my own cabin is walking distance from that.
So, Frank, you were struck by how, I mean, in many ways, how similar their lives were to the lives we lead today. And what were the similarities that you found?
The love of the water, I think, just enchanted with the beauty of this place.
So what for you emerges from these diaries that you found of Lizzie's that your father owns? What emerges in terms of their relationship?
A newspaper clipping announcing her death said that she and my father were to have been married on the day that she died. I'm not sure that that's accurate. I tried to check for a marriage license and could not find one. But obviously it was an intimate relationship, and she clearly was in love with my father, who I hasten to add was not at that time married.
You had to do some detective work to figure out what happened to her. Do you feel you know what happened to her, how she died?
Yes, I do. And the basis for that is her death certificate, which I obtained from the state. Cause of her death was septicemia, or blood poisoning, but the secondary cause was induced abortion.
And that's all we know, right? We don't know who the father was, though you think it was probably your father, given their relationship.
Given the relationship, it would be hard to deny his involvement, yes.
And they were going to get married, And there's not a lot of, the one thing that isn't in this diary, right, is her gushing confession about what was happening to her personally.
That's right, and why she had the abortion, I have no idea.
Is that frustrating for you?
Oh, yes. Wouldn't you like to know what was in her head? And that's why the absence of the final 6 months in diary form of her life is frustrating.
This was a historical piece, a detective piece. You consulted other folks who were historians to sort of put this story together of what life was like and what her life was like. But you also wrote that not a story you probably would have told if your parents and your uncles and aunts were still alive.
I discussed this with my father, who's been dead for 40 years, in the sort of intimate conversations that I didn't realize you could continue after death. And I have quite a lot of compunction about telling his story, but I justify that to myself by thinking that there's value in seeing how people lived then, and also the continuing need for the access to safe abortions.
That runs through from 1909 to today, that this woman, you ended it by saying, oh, how much you missed. That this woman was brought down because of lack of safety.
25 years old. Yeah, just at the peak of her life.
Frank Wetzel's book is Lizzie. It's a portrait of a woman, also a portrait of the era and the area that we live in. One last thing. you do tell a story of later growing up in this area. You talk about it, and also the woman who helped you sort of think this through, Freddie Perry, described this area as. Describe how you guys played in the water for me when you were little kids and even growing up as teenagers. How did you play in the water out there around Bremerton, in that area?
When you're on the shore and the sun is out, it's hard to keep a child out of the water. And I remember the first time that I swam at age 4 or 5, we were in Fletcher's Bay on Bainbridge Island, and I was mud crawling, which you probably know is just pulling yourself along with your hands. And I got out too far, and I kept going, and I was saying, "Mom, I'm swimming." And then there was access to boats, always, of a great variety. My father got me a sailboat when I was 12.
Why weren't you cold?
Oh, it wasn't cold. Not to us kids. Is that what you meant? Yeah. No. Although occasionally we would, when I was older, in high school, for instance, we would sneak out to Hood Canal where the water was warmer.
I just find that astounding that you weren't cold swimming. So, some kid gets. There's a story you tell of some kid falls into the water, and your dad gets out the quickest in his own boat to pull the kid out?
He did, yes. And then later there was a newspaper account that said he was pulled from the chilly waters of Sinclair Inlet, and we laughed. Who says they're chilly? They weren't to us.
Do you think your kids and your grandkids play in the water the same way as you guys did?
In many ways they do, and that pleases me ever so much. We have a family baptism that we provide our grandchildren as they get to be a year or 2 years old, where we take them down to the water, in this case on Daybaugh Bay, and dip their feet in and then introduce them to the oysters that are on the beach.
Well, it's a fine portrait of the time and a fine history, and there's lots of other stuff in here. And it's a reminder, too, of how important letters and diaries are to really understanding where we live.
Oh, I agree so much. And there are, in the attics of our houses, wonderful stories waiting to be told.
Frank Wetzel's book is Lizzie. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Lizzie is available on Amazon. Proceeds go to the Kitsap County Historical Museum. This is Weekday.